At 9:47 p.m. on March 22, 2001, the temperature in Logan, Ohio, population 7,152, had dropped to 41 degrees Fahrenheit. A damp spring wind carried the smell of wet earth and budding trees through the empty streets of this Hocking County town, nestled in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. The downtown was quiet, most businesses closed for the night, their windows dark except for the occasional security light casting long shadows across cracked sidewalks. Jennifer Hayes, 25 years old, locked the back door of First National Bank at exactly 9:52 p.m. She was 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Security footage from the bank's rear entrance would later show Jennifer pulling her navy blue jacket tighter against the cold, adjusting the canvas bag on her shoulder, the one with her wallet, her phone, her keys. She glanced at her car, a 1997 burgundy Honda Civic, parked under the only working streetlight in the employee lot, 23 feet from where she stood. She never made it to that car. By 10:15 p.m., her phone was going straight to voicemail. By 10:45 p.m., her boyfriend was standing in that same parking lot, staring at her abandoned vehicle with the driver's door still locked, her canvas bag lying in the gravel near the bank's dumpster, contents spilled, lipstick, breath mints, her employee badge with her photo smiling up at the night sky. By midnight, Logan Police Department had opened a missing persons investigation. The question that would haunt this community for nearly 2 decades was simple and terrifying. What happened in the 23 feet between the bank's back door and Jennifer's car? What happened in those 8 minutes between 9:52 p.m. and the moment her phone went silent forever? And perhaps more chilling, who had been watching, waiting, planning? Asterisk before we continue with Jennifer's story, if you're finding this investigation compelling, please consider subscribing. We bring you the most thoroughly researched cold cases, told with respect for the victims and their families. Your support helps us continue this work. Asterisk. Jennifer Hayes had been awake since 5:30 that morning. She'd woken her 3 children, Emma, 6, Daniel, 4, and baby Grace, 18 months, dressed them in layers against the unseasonable cold, dropped the older 2 at Logan Elementary, and taken Grace to her mother's house on Maple Street before driving to her shift at the bank. She worked part-time, 25 hours a week spread across Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. The schedule allowed her to spend mornings with Grace and be home before the older children's bedtime most nights. It was a careful balance, constructed piece by piece after her divorce from Michael Hayes had been finalized 8 months earlier, in July 2000. Jennifer's friends described her as resilient but exhausted. At Grace Community Church, where she attended services every Sunday morning, she sang in the choir and helped organize the children's ministry. Her voice was described as clear and hopeful, according to Pastor David Richardson, who would later speak at her memorial service. She volunteered at the elementary school library on Thursday mornings. She was learning to manage the finances, something Michael had always controlled during their 7-year marriage. She was building a new life. Her mother, Patricia Cook, 52, would tell investigators. She was scared sometimes, but she was doing it. She was becoming herself again. But that new life came with complications. The divorce had been contentious. Jennifer had been granted full custody of the children after family court judge Margaret Thornton reviewed evidence of Michael's controlling behavior. Detailed phone records showing he'd called Jennifer's cell phone 47 times in a single day. Testimony from neighbors who'd witnessed shouting matches. A police report from October 1999 when officers responded to a domestic disturbance call at their residence on Valley View Drive. Michael had been granted supervised visitation every other Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., with his parents present. He was not happy with the arrangement. Neither were his parents. Michael Hayes, 28, worked as a mechanic at Henderson's Auto Repair on Main Street, 3 blocks from the bank where Jennifer worked. He lived with his parents, Robert and Sandra Hayes, in a modest 2-story house on the outskirts of Logan, surrounded by 15 acres of farmland that had been in the Hayes family for 3 generations. Robert Hayes, 56, ran a small nonprofit called Hocking Valley Youth Outreach, which claimed to provide mentorship and religious education to at-risk teenagers. Tax records would later reveal the organization had minimal activity. $3,200 in donations in 2000, no paid staff, no regular programming. It existed primarily on paper, its listed address the same as the Hayes family home. Sandra Hayes, 54, did not work outside the home. Neighbors described her as intensely protective of Michael, her only child, and deeply involved in Grace Community Church, where she taught Sunday school and organized women's Bible study groups. The family dynamic was, according to multiple sources, enmeshed. Michael couldn't make a decision without consulting his mother, said Jennifer's friend Rachel Morrison, who'd known Jennifer since high school. When they were married, Sandra would call their house every morning at 7 a.m. If Jennifer answered, Sandra would ask to speak to Michael. If Jennifer said he was in the shower, Sandra would wait on the line. She'd wait 15 minutes if she had to. After the divorce, the calls didn't stop, they intensified. Jennifer's phone records from January 2001 showed 32 calls from Sandra's number. Jennifer had stopped answering by February. The calls continued anyway, going to voicemail, filling her inbox with messages that started as requests to talk about the children, and escalated to accusations that Jennifer was keeping the children from their father, that she was turning them against their family, that she was living in sin. The sin, in Sandra's view, was Jennifer's new relationship. Jennifer had started seeing Thomas Carter in December 2000, 3 months after meeting him at a Christmas fundraiser for the elementary school. Thomas, 29, worked as a loan officer at Logan Community Credit Union. He was quiet, reliable, divorced with no children. He attended the same church as Jennifer, though he sat in the back pews and left immediately after services. Friends said he made Jennifer laugh, something she hadn't done much in years. But Michael and his parents saw Thomas as an intruder, a threat, evidence of Jennifer's moral failing. In January 2001, Sandra Hayes filed a complaint with Child Protective Services alleging Jennifer was exposing the children to an inappropriate relationship and neglecting their spiritual development. The case was investigated and closed within 2 weeks. Investigators found no evidence of neglect, no signs of harm, a clean and loving home where the children were thriving. In February, Robert Hayes followed Thomas to the grocery store and confronted him in the parking lot. According to the police report filed that evening, Robert stood inches from Thomas's face and said, "You're destroying a family. You need to leave Jennifer alone, or you're going to regret it." Thomas reported the incident. Police visited the Hayes home and issued a warning. No charges were filed. In early March, Michael began parking his truck outside Jennifer's rental house on Oak Street, a small blue bungalow with a fenced backyard where the children played on a swing set Jennifer had bought at a yard sale. He'd sit there for hours, engine off, windows down even in the cold, watching. Jennifer called the police 3 times. Each time, officers drove by, spoke to Michael, told him to leave. Each time, Michael would drive away only to return the next day or the day after. "She was afraid," Patricia Cook said. "She told me she felt like she was being hunted." On March 20th, 2 days before Jennifer vanished, Thomas stayed at her house overnight for the first time. The children were at Patricia's house for a sleepover. It was Jennifer's night off from the bank. She and Thomas cooked dinner, watched a movie, fell asleep on the couch. At 6:43 a.m. the next morning, someone threw a brick through Jennifer's front window. By the time Jennifer called the police and they arrived, the street was empty. The brick had a note rubber banded to it, written in block letters on notebook paper, "Whore." Jennifer filed a report. She suspected Michael or his parents but had no proof. The handwriting couldn't be matched, block letters, no identifying characteristics. The brick was standard red clay, sold at every hardware store in the county. Officer Dennis Miller, who responded to the call, wrote in his report, "Victim appeared shaken but determined. Stated she would not be intimidated. Advised to consider restraining order." Jennifer didn't have time to file for a restraining order. She had 48 hours left. Jennifer woke at 5:30 a.m. As always, she showered, dressed in black slacks and a white blouse, her bank uniform, and made breakfast for the children. Scrambled eggs, toast, Orange juice poured into plastic cups with cartoon characters on the sides. Emma wanted her hair in braids. Daniel couldn't find his favorite dinosaur toy and cried until Jennifer found it wedged behind the couch cushions. Grace sat in her high chair, smearing mashed banana on her tray and laughing. It was ordinary. Beautifully, heartbreakingly ordinary. At 7:50 a.m., Jennifer loaded all 3 children into the Civic and drove to Logan Elementary. Security footage from the school's front entrance shows her walking Emma and Daniel to the door, kneeling to adjust Emma's backpack, kissing Daniel's forehead. She's smiling. Daniel is holding the dinosaur toy. At 8:15 a.m., Jennifer dropped Grace at Patricia's house. She seemed tired, Patricia recalled. I asked if she was sleeping okay. She said she kept waking up at night, listening for sounds outside. She said she'd been having nightmares about Michael showing up at the house. Patricia offered to keep all 3 children that night so Jennifer could rest after her shift. Jennifer hesitated. She liked being home with them, but finally agreed. I'll pick them up tomorrow morning, Jennifer said as she left. Love you, Mom. Those were the last words Patricia heard her daughter speak. Jennifer spent the rest of the day running errands. Bank records show she stopped at Logan Pharmacy at 10:23 a.m. and purchased children's vitamins and cold medicine. At 11:45 a.m., she bought groceries at Savamart: milk, bread, chicken breasts, apples, pasta, jar of marinara sauce, $47.82 on her debit card. At 1:30 p.m., she met Thomas for lunch at Corner Diner on Main Street. They sat in a booth by the window. The waitress, Karen Phillips, remembered them clearly. They were holding hands across the table, Karen said. Jennifer ordered the grilled cheese and tomato soup, always got that. She seemed happy. They were talking about maybe taking a trip in the summer, just the 2 of them, if Jennifer could find someone to watch the kids. Normal couple stuff. Thomas walked Jennifer to her car at 2:15 p.m. They stood talking for a few minutes in the diner parking lot. Security footage from the hardware store across the street shows them embracing, Jennifer resting her head on Thomas's shoulder, before they separate and get into their respective vehicles. At 3 p.m., Jennifer called her friend Rachel. She wanted to know if I could babysit Saturday night, Rachel said. Thomas was going to take her to a movie in Columbus. She was excited. She sounded really good. At 5:45 p.m., Jennifer arrived at First National Bank for her shift. Her supervisor, Linda Garrett, would later tell police that Jennifer seemed perfectly normal. Efficient, friendly, chatting with customers, processing transactions, balancing the cash drawer at the end of her shift with 0 discrepancies. At 9:30 p.m., Jennifer texted Thomas. Almost done. Call you when I get home. At 9:47 p.m., Linda left through the front entrance, leaving Jennifer alone to lock up the back. Standard procedure for closing shifts. At 9:52 p.m., security cameras captured Jennifer exiting the rear door. At 9:53 p.m., her phone's GPS signal pinged from a location 3 blocks away, moving north on Route 93. At 9:58 p.m., the signal died. Jennifer Hayes vanished into the cold Ohio night. Thomas called Jennifer at 10:15 p.m. Voicemail. He waited 5 minutes, called again. Voicemail. By 10:30, he was worried. Jennifer always called when she got home. He drove to her house on Oak Street. Her car wasn't there. Lights off. He called Patricia. Has Jennifer picked up the kids yet? No, Patricia said. She was going straight home after work. Said she'd get them in the morning. Thomas drove to the bank. He pulled into the employee parking lot at 10:41 p.m. and immediately saw Jennifer's Civic under the streetlight, exactly where it had been when he'd driven past the bank earlier that evening on his way home from work. He parked next to it and got out. The driver's door was locked. He peered through the window. Nothing appeared disturbed inside. He walked toward the bank's back entrance and spotted Jennifer's canvas bag lying on the ground near the dumpster, 10 feet from the door. Thomas's hands were shaking when he called 911 at 10:44 p.m. My girlfriend, she's missing. Her car is here, but she's not. Her purse is on the ground. Something's wrong. Something's really wrong. The first patrol car arrived at 11:02 p.m., 18 minutes after Thomas's call. Officer Dennis Miller stepped out of his vehicle, flashlight in hand, and immediately secured the scene. He photographed Jennifer's bag and its contents scattered on the gravel. Wallet with her driver's license visible. Cell phone with a cracked screen, loose change, employee badge, a half-eaten granola bar, tube of lipstick. He radioed for backup and called Detective Laura Martinez, head of Logan PD's Criminal Investigations Unit. Martinez arrived at 11:26 p.m. She was 41 years old, 15 years with the department, former prosecutor's office investigator before joining Logan PD in 1998. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and carried a digital camera, cutting-edge technology in 2001, recently acquired by the department. She photographed everything. The bag, the scattered contents, Jennifer's locked car, the back door of the bank, the dumpster, the streetlight, the empty parking lot stretching into darkness. "Talk to me," Martinez said to Thomas, who stood near his truck, pale and shaking. Thomas explained Jennifer's schedule, when she'd last texted, when he'd realized something was wrong. "Any problems lately?" Martinez asked. "Arguments? Anyone giving her trouble?" Thomas didn't hesitate. "Her ex-husband, Michael Hayes, and his parents. They've been harassing her for months. She filed police reports. There's a brick through her window 2 days ago. She's been scared." Martinez wrote down the names, then turned to Officer Miller. "Get me Michael Hayes' address, and I want patrol units there now, just to confirm his location. Don't approach, just observe." By 11:45 p.m., a patrol car was parked down the street from the Hayes family property. By midnight, Logan Police Department had opened a missing persons investigation and issued a BOLO, be on the lookout, for Jennifer Hayes. White female, 25 years old, 5 feet 4 inches, 120 pounds, blonde shoulder-length hair, last seen wearing black slacks, white blouse, navy blue jacket. By 12:30 a.m., Detective Martinez was interviewing Linda Garrett, the bank supervisor. "Did Jennifer seem upset or worried during her shift?" Martinez asked. "No," Linda said. "She was fine. Normal. We closed together. I left through the front. She locked the back. That's how we always do it." "Did you see anyone outside? Any vehicles in the parking lot?" Linda hesitated. "There was a truck. Dark-colored, maybe blue or black. It drove past slowly while we were closing out the registers. I noticed because it was the only vehicle on the street. But it didn't stop." "What time?" "Around 9:40. Martinez made a note. "Dark truck. 9:40 p.m. At 1:15 a.m., Patricia Cook arrived at the police station, frantic. "Where's my daughter? What happened to my daughter?" Martinez sat with her in a small interview room and explained what they knew, which was almost nothing. "We're going to find her," Martinez said. "But I need you to tell me everything. Start with Michael Hayes." Patricia talked for 40 minutes, describing the controlling marriage, the contentious divorce, the custody battle, the harassment, the threats, the brick through the window. "He blamed Jennifer for everything," Patricia said. "For the divorce, for losing custody. His mother, Sandra. She's worse. She acts like Jennifer stole her grandchildren. Like Jennifer's some kind of monster. But my daughter is a good person. A good mother. She just wanted to be free." At 2 a.m., Martinez made the decision to wake up Judge Thornton and request an emergency search warrant for the Hayes property. At 2:45 a.m., the warrant was granted. At 3:30 a.m., Detective Martinez, Officer Miller, and 4 additional officers approached the Hayes family home with sirens off, headlights dimmed. The house was dark except for a single light in an upstairs window. Martinez knocked on the front door. Robert Hayes answered, wearing a bathrobe, squinting against the flashlight beams. "What's this about?" "We need to speak with you, your wife, and your son," Martinez said. "Jennifer Hayes is missing. We're interviewing everyone who knows her." Robert's expression didn't change. "It's 3:30 in the morning. I'm aware." Sandra appeared behind Robert, wearing a floral nightgown, her gray hair loose around her shoulders. Missing? What do you mean missing? She didn't come home from work. Her car was found at the bank. We're trying to establish a timeline. Well, we don't know anything about it, Sandra said. We were here all evening. Is Michael home? He's asleep. I need to speak with him. Michael came downstairs 5 minutes later, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, rubbing his eyes. He looked genuinely confused. What's going on? Martinez studied his face. No nervousness, no defensiveness, just sleepy bewilderment. Where were you tonight between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m.? Here, home, with my parents. All evening. Yeah, we had dinner around 6:30, watched TV. I went to bed around 10. Can anyone verify that besides your parents? No, but it's true. Martinez made notes. What about your truck? Where is it? In the barn. Can I see it? Michael glanced at his father, who nodded. They walked outside, flashlights cutting through the darkness, to the barn behind the house. Inside, a dark blue 1995 Ford F-150 sat in the shadows. Engine cold, dust on the hood. Martinez ran her hand along the hood. Cold. She photographed the license plate, the tires, the interior visible through the windows. You didn't leave the house tonight? No. You're sure? Michael's jaw tightened. Am I under arrest? No. Then I'm sure. I was home. I don't know what happened to Jennifer, but it's got nothing to do with me. Martinez didn't argue. She thanked them for their cooperation, asked them to remain available for further questions, and left. By 5 a.m., she was back at the station, reviewing her notes. The timeline was tight. Jennifer disappeared between 9:52 p.m. and 9:58 p.m. Michael claimed to be home. His parents vouched for him. His truck was cold. But Martinez's instincts, honed over 15 years, were screaming. Something was wrong with that family. Dawn broke cold and gray over Logan on March 23, 2001. By 7 a.m., volunteer searchers began gathering at Grace Community Church, the staging area for what would become one of the largest search operations in Hocking County history. Pastor Richardson opened the church gymnasium, where volunteers spread topographical maps across folding tables and divided the surrounding area into grid sections. The terrain was challenging. Hocking Hills State Park bordered Logan to the east, dense forests and ravines stretching for miles, caves and cliffs and hidden hollows where someone could vanish without a trace. The Ohio State Highway Patrol provided a helicopter equipped with FLIR, forward-looking infrared technology capable of detecting body heat through tree canopy. K-9 units arrived from Columbus, German shepherds trained in cadaver detection and trailing. By 9 a.m., over 200 volunteers were in the field. They walked shoulder to shoulder through the woods surrounding the bank, calling Jennifer's name, pushing through underbrush, scanning the ground for any sign. Clothing, footprints, disturbance in the leaves. The temperature climbed to 58 degrees Fahrenheit by noon, humid and sticky, sweat beading on collars, radios crackling with constant check-ins. Grid A3 clear. Grid B7 clear. Grid C2 found a jacket. Blue. Women's size medium. Martinez's pulse spiked. She drove to Grid C2, a wooded area half a mile from the bank. The jacket was hanging from a branch, snagged. Navy blue. But when they checked the tag, size large. Men's. Not Jennifer's. By 3 p.m., nothing. No trace. No clues. The helicopter circled overhead, thermal imaging showing only deer and small animals moving through the forest, heat signatures too small to be human. At 5:30 p.m., the K-9 units were deployed with clothing from Jennifer's house. A t-shirt from her laundry basket, scent articles for the dogs to track. The dogs led handlers to the bank parking lot, circled Jennifer's car, then moved toward Route 93 and stopped. The trail went cold at the road's edge. She got into a vehicle, the K-9 handler said. That's where the scent ends. Martinez stood at the roadside, staring north toward where Jennifer's phone had last pinged. Someone had taken her, forced her into a vehicle, driven away. But who and where? By March 24th, Jennifer's disappearance was front-page news. The Logan Daily News ran her photo, smiling, blonde hair falling past her shoulders, wearing a church choir robe. The headline, "Local Mother Missing. Family Fears Foul Play." Tips began flooding the police hotline. A driver reported seeing a dark truck speeding north on Route 93 around 10 p.m. on March 22nd. Driving erratic. Almost ran me off the road. A gas station attendant remembered a man in a dark jacket and baseball cap purchasing zip ties and duct tape on March 21st. Paid cash. Didn't make eye contact. A neighbor of the Hayes family called to report seeing Michael's truck leaving the property around 9:15 p.m. on March 22nd, contradicting his alibi. Martinez immediately followed up on the neighbor's tip. Eleanor Whitman, 67, lived a quarter-mile from the Hayes property. She'd been letting her dog out around 9:15 p.m. when she saw headlights turning out of the Hayes driveway. "It was Michael's truck," Eleanor said. "I recognized it. Blue Ford, dent in the passenger side door. He always drives too fast on that road, kicks up dust." Martinez showed her a photo of Michael's truck. "You're certain? Positive? What time did you see it return?" "I didn't. I went to bed around 10:30, but it was gone at 9:15. Martinez returned to the Hayes property on March 25th with a warrant to examine Michael's truck more thoroughly. Forensic technician Paul Diaz arrived with a portable UV light and evidence collection kit. He spent 3 hours examining the truck's interior seats, floor mats, cargo bed, searching for blood, hair, fibers, anything. He found dust, dirt, grease stains from Michael's work at the auto repair shop, but no biological evidence. No sign Jennifer had ever been inside that vehicle. "It's clean," Diaz told Martinez. "Too clean. Floor mats look recently scrubbed." "Can you determine when they were cleaned?" "Not with certainty, but the dirt pattern is inconsistent, clean in some areas, caked in others. Someone cleaned specific sections." Martinez photographed the truck from every angle, collected soil samples from the tires, took scrapings from the cargo bed. But without DNA or blood, without Jennifer, it was circumstantial. Not enough for an arrest. The days blurred together. March 26th. A hiker in Hocking Hills State Park reported finding a woman's shoe near Ash Cave. Search teams descended on the area. The shoe was a Nike running sneaker, size 8. Jennifer wore size 7. Not hers. March 28th. A trucker called to report seeing a woman matching Jennifer's description at a rest stop near Columbus. Police reviewed security footage. The woman was in her 40s with dark hair. Not Jennifer. March 30th. A psychic contacted the police claiming she'd had a vision of Jennifer in a white building near water. Detective Martinez didn't believe in psychics, but she was desperate. They searched abandoned houses near the Hocking River. Nothing. April 2nd. A fisherman found a purse floating in Lake Logan. The purse was brown leather. Jennifer's was canvas. Not hers. Each false lead drained resources, exhausted volunteers, and deepened the family's agony. Patricia Cook kept Jennifer's cell phone number active, paying the bill every month, calling it every night before bed just to hear her daughter's voice on the voicemail greeting. "Hi, you've reached Jennifer. Leave a message." Patricia would sit on her couch in the dark, listening to that recording, and cry. Detective Martinez interviewed Michael Hayes 3 more times in April 2001. Each time, his story remained consistent. He was home all evening on March 22nd. His parents confirmed it. He didn't leave. He didn't see Jennifer. He didn't know what happened to her. "Do you care what happened to her?" Martinez asked during their 4th interview on April 15th. Michael stared at the table. "Of course I care. She's the mother of my children. But you blamed her for the divorce." "The divorce was hard. I admit that. But I wouldn't hurt her. Your neighbor saw your truck leaving your property at 9:15 p.m. that night." "My neighbor's mistaken. You threatened her boyfriend." "I never threatened anyone. You parked outside her house for hours at a time watching. I wanted to see my kids. That's not a crime." Martinez leaned forward. "Where is Jennifer?" Michael's eyes met hers, flat, emotionless. I don't know. She interviewed Robert Hayes separately. Your son's alibi depends entirely on you and your wife, Martinez said. Convenient. Robert folded his hands on the table. It's the truth. Your nonprofit Hocking Valley Youth Outreach. What exactly do you do? We provide guidance, mentorship, Christian values. Tax records show minimal activity. We're a small operation. You confronted Thomas Carter in a parking lot. I expressed concerns about my grandchildren's welfare. You threatened him. I did not. Martinez slid a photograph across the table. Jennifer's smiling face from the church directory. This woman is missing. Someone took her. Someone who knew her schedule, knew when she'd be alone, knew how to make her disappear without a trace. Someone who had a reason to want her gone. Robert stared at the photo, expression unreadable. I loved Jennifer like a daughter, he said quietly. She was part of our family for 7 years. We prayed for her soul, but she made choices that took her away from God, away from her family. Those choices have consequences. What kind of consequences? Robert pushed the photo back across the table. I can't tell you what happened to Jennifer, but I can tell you that God's judgment is real, and sin has a price. Martinez felt ice run down her spine. Are you confessing to something, Mr. Hayes? I'm confessing nothing. I'm stating facts. The interview ended with no arrest, no confession, no evidence. Just a cold certainty in Martinez's gut that Robert Hayes knew exactly what happened to Jennifer, and he'd never tell. By June 2001, the investigation had consumed over 3,000 volunteer hours, reviewed 217 tips, interviewed 64 people, and searched 48 square miles of forest. Jennifer Hayes remained missing. Her children asked for her every day. Emma drew pictures of their house with 4 stick figures. Mommy, Emma, Daniel, Grace, and hung them on Patricia's refrigerator. Daniel slept with the dinosaur toy Jennifer had found for him that last morning. Grace, not yet 2 years old, would look at photos of Jennifer and say, Mama. The media coverage dwindled. By July, Jennifer's case was mentioned once a week in the local paper, then once a month, then not at all. National outlets never picked it up. A missing woman in rural Ohio, no celebrity connection, no sensational details beyond the tragedy itself. The case file remained open, but active investigation slowed to a crawl. Detective Martinez kept working it on her own time, reviewing evidence, re-interviewing witnesses, driving past the Hayes property at odd hours, hoping to spot something, anything. But she had no physical evidence, no body, no confession, no way to prove what she knew in her heart to be true. On July 18, 2001, Jennifer's 26th birthday, Patricia Cook organized a vigil at Grace Community Church. 50 people attended. They lit candles, prayed, sang hymns. Pastor Richardson spoke about faith and hope and the certainty that God knew where Jennifer was, even if they didn't. Patricia placed flowers at the spot where Jennifer's bag had been found behind the bank. White daisies, Jennifer's favorite. Michael Hayes and his parents did not attend. The evidence room at Logan Police Department was a narrow basement space with cinder block walls painted institutional beige and rows of metal shelving stretching from floor to ceiling. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in harsh white light. Box hashtag 2001-047 sat on the third shelf from the floor. Hayes. Jennifer missing person. Inside, Jennifer's canvas bag, sealed in plastic. Her cell phone, battery removed, stored in an anti-static bag. Her wallet, driver's license visible through clear evidence sleeves. Photographs of her abandoned car. Soil samples from Michael's truck tires in labeled vials. Fiber samples collected from the truck's cargo bed in manila envelopes marked Fiber A through Fiber G. And swabs. Dozens of swabs. Forensic technician Paul Diaz had collected DNA samples from Michael's truck, steering wheel, door handle, gear shift, hoping to find trace evidence of Jennifer. The samples had been sent to the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation Lab in London, Ohio, for analysis. The BCI lab in 2001 was overwhelmed, underfunded, understaffed, processing evidence from hundreds of cases across the state. Cold cases waited months, sometimes years, for DNA analysis. Jennifer's samples waited 6 months. The results came back in September 2001. 3 distinct DNA profiles detected. Profile 1. Michael Hayes, confirmed via comparison sample. Profile 2. Unknown male contributor, partial profile, insufficient markers for Cody's database comparison. Profile 3. Unknown male contributor, partial profile, degraded, insufficient for analysis. The unknown profiles were useless in 2001. 2 degraded, 2 partial, not enough genetic markers to identify or match to any database. The technology simply couldn't extract meaningful data from samples that had been exposed to heat, humidity, and time. Detective Martinez read the report and felt her last thread of hope snap. Without a body, without a confession, without usable DNA, the case was at a standstill. She filed the report in box hashtag 2001-047 and kept searching. Over the next 2 years, Martinez investigated every possible lead, every tangential connection, every person who'd had contact with Jennifer in the weeks before she vanished. Person of interest number 1, Michael Hayes. Michael remained Martinez's primary suspect, but his alibi, corroborated by both parents, was insurmountable without physical evidence placing him at the scene. In October 2001, Martinez obtained Michael's phone records for March 22. They showed no calls made or received between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m., consistent with his claim that he was home watching TV. But absence of phone activity didn't prove innocence. It just meant he hadn't used his phone. Martinez checked Michael's work schedule at Henderson's Auto Repair. He'd clocked out at 5:30 p.m. on March 22. Plenty of time to get home, change clothes, and leave again by 9:15 p.m. She interviewed Michael's co-workers. Did he ever talk about his ex-wife? All the time, said Gary Henderson, the shop owner. He was bitter, said she'd ruined his life, taken his kids, turned them against him. But lots of divorced guys talk like that. Doesn't mean they do anything. Did he ever threaten her? Not directly, but he'd say things like, she's going to regret this, or she thinks she's won, but she hasn't. Angry talk. Venting. Martinez pushed harder. Did you notice any changes in his behavior after March 22nd? Gary thought for a moment. Actually, yeah. He called in sick March 23rd and 24th. Said he had the flu. When he came back, he seemed off, jumpy, kept checking his phone. But by the next week, he was back to normal. Sick days immediately after Jennifer's disappearance. Convenient, but not proof. Robert Hayes, Michael's father, had a more shadowy presence in the investigation. His nonprofit Hocking Valley Youth Outreach remained a puzzle. Martinez obtained tax filings and discovered the organization had listed expenses of $2,800 in 2000. But no receipts, no documentation of programs or participants. She interviewed teenagers from Grace Community Church who Robert claimed to mentor. None remembered participating in any structured program. Mr. Hayes would sometimes give us rides home from church, one teenager said. He'd talk about the Bible, about staying on the right path. But it wasn't like a formal thing, just rides. Martinez checked Robert's criminal history. Clean. No arrests, no warrants, no red flags. But his behavior toward Jennifer and Thomas had been aggressive, intimidating. The parking lot confrontation, the false CPS complaint, the constant phone calls to Jennifer's cell, and his comment during interrogation haunted Martinez. Asterisk, sin has a price. Asterisk. What did that mean? She couldn't prove it meant anything. Religious language wasn't evidence of murder. Sandra Hayes, Michael's mother, was perhaps the most unsettling figure in the family dynamic. Her obsession with Michael bordered on pathological. Friends from church described her as fiercely protective, controlling, unable to let go. Sandra treated Michael like he was still a child, one church member said. She'd cut his food at potlucks. She'd answer questions directed to him. She'd call him my baby in front of everyone. It was strange. After the divorce, Sandra's focus shifted to the grandchildren. She wanted custody, wanted them back in the Hayes household where she could raise them properly. Martinez reviewed the CPS complaint Sandra had filed in January 2001. The allegations were specific. Jennifer was exposing children to immoral behavior, failing to take them to church regularly, allowing an unmarried man to stay overnight. CPS investigators had found no merit to any claim. But Sandra's complaint revealed something else. She had intimate knowledge of Jennifer's schedule, her routines, her movements. She knew when Thomas stayed overnight. She knew which nights Jennifer worked at the bank. She'd been watching. Martinez interviewed Sandra on November 12, 2001. Did you ever go to the bank while Jennifer was working? No. Did you drive past her house? Sometimes. To check on my grandchildren. How often? I don't remember. Did you know her work schedule? I knew she worked evenings. Michael told me. Did you ever follow her? Sandra's expression hardened. I am a Christian woman. I don't follow people. I pray for them. Did you pray for Jennifer? Every day. I prayed she'd see the error of her ways and return to her family. What error? Adultery. Abandoning her husband. Destroying her children's home. Jennifer was divorced. She wasn't committing adultery. In God's eyes, divorce is sin. Marriage is sacred. Martinez leaned forward. Where is Jennifer, Mrs. Hayes? Sandra's hands folded in her lap, calm and steady. I don't know, but wherever she is, I pray she's found peace with the Lord. The interview ended with nothing actionable. Just a growing certainty that Sandra Hayes knew more than she was saying. Person of interest number 4, Thomas Carter. Martinez had to investigate Jennifer's boyfriend, even though every instinct told her he was innocent. Thomas had no criminal record, no history of violence, no motive to harm Jennifer. He'd been the one to report her missing, the one to find her abandoned car. But procedure demanded thoroughness. Martinez reviewed Thomas's phone records. Multiple calls to Jennifer between 10:15 p.m. and 10:40 p.m. on March 22nd, all going to voicemail. His GPS data from his cell phone showed he was at his apartment until 10:30 p.m., then traveled directly to Jennifer's house, then to the bank. His alibi was airtight. She interviewed his co-workers at the credit union. Thomas is the most boring, reliable person I know, said his supervisor. He shows up on time, does his work, goes home. No drama. She interviewed his ex-wife, who divorced him in 1998. Tom's a good guy. We just weren't compatible. He's quiet, introverted. I needed someone more outgoing. But he never raised his voice, never threatened me, never gave me any reason to be afraid of him. Martinez cleared Thomas as a suspect by December 2001. He continued calling the police weekly, asking for updates, begging them not to give up. I loved her, he told Martinez during one of those calls. I was going to marry her. We talked about it, not yet, but someday when the kids were ready. She was my future. His voice broke. Please find her. Please. The first anniversary of Jennifer's disappearance, March 22, 2002, brought a brief resurgence of media attention. The Logan Daily News ran a feature. 1 year later, where's Jennifer Hayes? Patricia Cook gave an interview, holding a framed photo of Jennifer. Someone knows something. Someone saw something. Please, if you have any information, come forward. We just want to bring her home. The article included a tip line number and a $10,000 reward, pooled from donations by Grace Community Church and local businesses. 3 new tips came in. All were investigated. All led nowhere. By March 23rd, the story was buried again, replaced by coverage of a factory fire in Columbus and the beginning of the Iraq War. Jennifer Hayes was forgotten by everyone except the people who loved her. 2003. Detective Martinez retired in June 2003 after 20 years with Logan PD. On her last day, she stood in the evidence room holding box #2001-047. I'm sorry I couldn't find you, she whispered to the box. She left her personal cell phone number with Patricia Cook. If anything breaks, call me. I don't care if I'm retired. I want to know. 2005. Michael Hayes remarried, a woman named Stephanie from Columbus. They had a daughter in 2006. He still worked at Henderson's Auto Repair. He still saw his children from his marriage to Jennifer every other Saturday, supervised by Patricia. Emma, Daniel, and Grace grew up in Patricia's house on Maple Street, surrounded by photos of their mother, hearing stories about her kindness, her laughter, her love for them. But Jennifer was fading from memory, especially for Grace, who'd been only 18 months old when her mother vanished. 2008. Sandra Hayes died of a heart attack in February 2008. She was 61. At her funeral, Pastor Richardson delivered a eulogy praising her dedication to the church, her devotion to her family, her faith. Patricia Cook did not attend. 2013. The Logan Daily News ran a brief article on the 12th anniversary of Jennifer's disappearance, noting the case remained unsolved. The article generated no new tips. 2015. Robert Hayes was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's disease. He retired from running Hocking Valley Youth Outreach, which had never grown beyond its paper existence, and spent his days at home, reading his Bible, tending his garden. He attended church every Sunday, sitting in the same pew he'd occupied for 40 years. He never mentioned Jennifer. 2017. On July 18th, Jennifer's birthday, Patricia Cook drove to the spot behind First National Bank where her daughter's bag had been found. She placed white daisies on the ground, as she did every year, and sat in her car crying. "I'm still here, baby," she whispered. "I'm still waiting for you." In January 2018, Logan Police Department underwent a reorganization. New Chief of Police David Carlson reviewed all open cases dating back more than 10 years. Budget constraints and staffing shortages required difficult decisions about resource allocation. On March 1, 2018, case hashtag 2001-047 was officially reclassified. Cold case. Pending investigation. The file was transferred from active investigations to the cold case archive. Box hashtag 2001-047 was moved to a climate-controlled storage facility on the outskirts of Logan, a converted warehouse with rows of steel shelves holding decades of unsolved mysteries. The fluorescent lights in the facility flickered and buzzed. Dust motes drifted through stale air. The temperature was kept at a steady 60 degrees Fahrenheit to preserve evidence. Jennifer's box sat on shelf 14C, between a 1997 arson case and a 2003 assault case. The swabs, those degraded, insufficient DNA samples, remained sealed in their evidence bags, waiting for technology to catch up, waiting for someone to care enough to look again. The case paused, but the obsession didn't. In January 2020, Logan Police Department hired Lieutenant Sarah Bennett as the new head of the cold case unit. Bennett was 38 years old, with sharp green eyes, auburn hair kept in a practical ponytail, and a reputation for tenacity. She'd spent 12 years with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, specializing in forensic genealogy and DNA analysis, before transferring to Logan PD with a specific mandate: review cold cases and apply new technologies to unsolved crimes. Her first week on the job, Bennett requested access to the cold case archive. She spent 3 days in that converted warehouse, walking up and down the aisles, pulling boxes at random, reading case files, getting a sense of what she was working with. On the afternoon of January 23, 2020, she pulled box hashtag 2001-047. Hayes, Jennifer missing person. Bennett sat on the floor, the box open in front of her, and read every document, every witness statement, every lab report, every photograph. She studied the photo of Jennifer. Blonde, smiling, full of life. She read Detective Martinez's notes. Asterisk, suspect ex-husband. Alibi provided by parents. No physical evidence. DNA insufficient for analysis. Asterisk. Bennett turned to the evidence inventory and found the entry for DNA samples collected from Michael Hayes's truck. Asterisk partial profiles. Degraded. Insufficient markers. 2001 technology unable to extract usable data. Asterisk. Bennett's pulse quickened. Insufficient in 2001. But it was 2020 now. The technology had changed. Dramatically. Bennett drove back to Logan PD and went straight to Chief Carlson's office. "I need to reopen the Jennifer Hayes case." Carlson looked up from his desk, surprised. "You've been here less than a week. And I've already found a case with solvable DNA evidence that's been sitting in storage for 19 years. She laid the case file on his desk and explained, "In 2001, DNA analysis relied on PCR polymerase chain reaction, which required relatively pristine samples with sufficient genetic material. Degraded samples exposed to heat or humidity often yielded partial profiles with too few markers to be useful. But in the intervening years, next-generation sequencing, NGS, had revolutionized forensic DNA analysis. NGS could extract complete genetic profiles from samples that would have been useless a decade earlier. It could sequence entire genomes from just a few cells, could work with degraded DNA, could identify individuals with extraordinary precision. And there was something else, something that had emerged in the last 5 years: forensic genealogy. In 2018, investigators had used genetic genealogy databases, sites like GeneMatch where people voluntarily uploaded their DNA to trace ancestry, to identify the Golden State Killer, a serial rapist and murderer who'd evaded capture for 40 years. The technique was simple in theory. Upload crime scene DNA to a genealogy database, find genetic matches with distant relatives, build a family tree, narrow down suspects based on age and geography, then confirm with direct DNA comparison. It had solved dozens of cold cases since 2018. Could solve Jennifer Hayes' case. "I need funding to send the DNA samples for NGS analysis," Bennett said. "And I need authorization to upload the genetic profile to genealogy databases if we get a usable result." Carlson studied the case file, then looked at Bennett. "How much?" $5,000 for sequencing. Additional costs if we need a genetic genealogist to build family trees. Carlson was quiet for a long moment. Then he signed the authorization form. "Bring her home," he said. On February 3, 2020, Bennett returned to the cold case storage facility with forensic technician Rachel Kim and evidence photographer Marcus Williams. They located box #2001-047 on shelf 14C. Bennett photographed the box in place, documented the evidence seal, still intact after 19 years, then carefully cut the seal and opened the box. Inside, everything was exactly as it had been left. Jennifer's bag, her phone, her wallet, and the swabs. Bennett lifted out the evidence envelope labeled DNA truck, handle 03.22.01. Inside, a cotton swab sealed in a plastic tube. The swab was faintly discolored, yellowed with age, but the tube seal was unbroken. "This is it," Bennett said. "Unknown male contributor. Partial profile in 2001. Let's see what 2020 technology can do." Rachel Kim prepared the sample for transport. The swab was placed in a new sterile container, sealed, labeled, and packed in a nitrogen-cooled shipping box designed to keep biological samples at -20 degrees Celsius during transit. The destination, GeneTech Forensics Laboratory, Columbus, Ohio, one of the leading private labs in the country for next-generation DNA sequencing. Marcus Williams photographed every step of the process, documenting chain of custody. On February 5, 2020, the sample was shipped. Bennett sent an email to Dr. Alan Porter, GeneTech's director. "Dr. Porter, asterisk enclosed is a DNA sample from a 2001 cold case homicide investigation. Original analysis yielded partial profile insufficient for identification. Requesting NGS analysis to extract full genetic profile if possible. Asterisk. Case priority, high. Please advise timeline and costs. Asterisk Lieutenant Sarah Bennett, Logan PD Cold Case Unit. Asterisk. Dr. Porter responded within 2 hours. Lieutenant Bennett. Asterisk sample received in excellent condition. Temperature maintained throughout transit. Will begin extraction and sequencing immediately. Asterisk. NGS process, 10 to 14 days. Cost, $4,800. Will update you as soon as results are available. Asterisk Dr. Alan Porter, GeneTech Forensics. Asterisk. Bennett waited. For the first time in 19 years, Jennifer Hayes's case was moving forward. Inside GeneTech's laboratory, a sterile white room with air filtration systems maintaining particle-free atmosphere, Dr. Porter and his team began the painstaking process of DNA extraction. The swab was placed in a solution of enzymes designed to break down the cotton fibers and release any biological material clinging to them. Over the next 48 hours, the solution gently dissolved cellular material, freeing DNA molecules from their degraded state. Under a high-powered microscope, the DNA appeared as tiny white strands floating in clear liquid, fragile, ancient, precious. The next step, amplification. Using next-generation sequencing technology, the lab could make billions of copies of the DNA fragments, then piece them together like a jigsaw puzzle, reconstructing the complete genetic sequence. Took 8 days. On February 13, 2020, Dr. Porter sent an email to Bennett. Lieutenant Bennett, *NGS analysis complete. Results exceeded expectations. We successfully extracted a full male DNA profile from the sample, 3.2 billion base pairs mapped with 99.4% accuracy. The profile is complete enough for genealogy database comparison and direct matching. Sending full report via secure file transfer. This is one of the best recoveries I've seen from a sample this old. Whoever sealed that swab in 2001 did everything right. Dr. Porter. Bennett read the email 3 times, hands shaking. They had a full DNA profile. After 19 years, they finally had something to work with. Bennett uploaded the DNA profile to GeneMatch, a public genealogy database with over 1.3 million users who'd voluntarily uploaded their genetic data to trace ancestry. Within hours, the system returned matches. The closest match, 1.2% genetic similarity. A woman named Rebecca Lawson, age 64, living in Akron, Ohio. 1.2% similarity suggested a relationship of approximately 4th cousins, meaning they shared a common ancestor roughly 4 or 5 generations back. Not close enough to identify the suspect directly, but close enough to build a family tree. Bennett contacted Dr. Helen Frost, a genetic genealogist who specialized in forensic cases. Dr. Frost had helped solve 17 cold cases since 2018, using genealogy databases to identify suspects through distant relatives. On February 20, 2020, Dr. Frost began building the tree. She started with Rebecca Lawson, the closest match, and traced her ancestry back through public records, census data, birth certificates, marriage licenses, death records. Rebecca's great-great-grandparents, Jonathan and Mary Keegan, married in 1898 in Cleveland, Ohio. They had 6 children. Dr. Frost traced the descendants of all 6 children, mapping out branches of the family tree across Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and West Virginia. Over the next 3 weeks, the tree grew to include over 300 individuals. Then Dr. Frost applied filters. Males only, the DNA profile was male. Aged 22 to 50 in 2001, likely age range for the suspect. Living in Ohio or bordering states in 2001. No verified alibi for March 22, 2001. The list narrowed to 12 men. Dr. Frost cross-referenced those 12 names with Logan PD's case files, looking for any connection to Jennifer Hayes, Michael Hayes, or the Hayes family. On March 15, 2020, she found it. One name appeared in Detective Martinez's original witness interviews. David Allen Crawford, 42 in 2001, currently 61, living in Nelsonville, Ohio, 12 miles from Logan. Crawford had been interviewed in April 2001 as a peripheral witness. He worked at a construction company that had done repairs on First National Bank in February 2001. He'd been on the job site for 2 weeks, had access to the building's layout, had seen Jennifer working at the teller counter. Martinez's notes from the interview were brief. Crawford worked at bank late February. Said he never spoke to victim, didn't recognize her photo initially. Alibi for March 22nd, home with wife. Wife confirmed. No follow-up needed. But now, 19 years later, David Crawford's name was on a genealogy tree connected to DNA found in Michael Hayes' truck. Bennett felt adrenaline surge through her veins. David Crawford. How did his DNA end up in Michael's truck? Bennett pulled every record she could find on David Crawford. Background asterisk. Born 1959, Nelsonville, Ohio. Married to Karen Crawford since 1985. 2 adult children. Employed by Summit Construction Company, 1995 to 2003. Employed by Hocking Valley Youth Outreach as a part-time maintenance worker, 2000 to 2008. Bennett stopped reading and reread that last line. Hocking Valley Youth Outreach. Robert Hayes' nonprofit. David Crawford had worked for Robert Hayes. Bennett pulled Robert Hayes' phone records from March 2001, records she'd requested weeks earlier as part of her case review. On March 22, 2001, Robert Hayes made a call to David Crawford's cell phone at 8:47 p.m. The call lasted for minutes. 45 minutes later, Jennifer Hayes vanished. Bennett's mind raced. She pulled Michael Hayes' employment records from Henderson's Auto Repair. In March 2001, Michael had been working on a fleet of vehicles for Summit Construction Company, David Crawford's employer. Michael and David knew each other. Robert and David knew each other. And David's DNA was in Michael's truck. Bennett called Chief Carlson. "We have a suspect, and I think I know how this happened." Before making an arrest, Bennett needed direct DNA confirmation. On March 20, 2020, she initiated surveillance on David Crawford. Crawford lived in a modest ranch house on the outskirts of Nelsonville, surrounded by woods, his nearest neighbor a quarter-mile away. He drove a 2015 Chevy Silverado. He worked part-time at a hardware store in town. On March 23, 2020, undercover officers followed Crawford to the hardware store, watched him work his shift, followed him to a McDonald's for lunch. Crawford ordered a Big Mac, large fries, and a Coke. He ate in his truck in the parking lot, then tossed the soda cup and food wrappers in the McDonald's trash bin. The moment Crawford drove away, Officer Kevin Torres retrieved the trash bag from the bin, sealed it in an evidence bag, and transported it directly to the lab. Rachel Kim processed the cup and the straw inside it, carefully swabbing the area where Crawford's mouth had touched. The swab was sent to GeneTech for expedited DNA analysis. On March 25, 2020, Dr. Porter called Bennett. "It's a match. 99.99% probability. The DNA from the truck in 2001 belongs to David Crawford." Bennett closed her eyes and exhaled. 19 years. They finally had him. March 28, 2020, 6:15 a.m. The sun was just beginning to rise over Nelsonville, casting pale light through the trees as 3 unmarked SUVs rolled silently down Crawford's gravel driveway. Bennett stepped out of the lead vehicle, followed by Chief Carlson, Officer Torres, and 4 additional officers in tactical gear. Bennett knocked on the front door. David Crawford answered 30 seconds later, wearing gray sweatpants and a faded Ohio State t-shirt, barefoot, holding a mug of coffee. He looked at Bennett, confused. "Can I help you?" Bennett held up her badge. "Mr. Crawford, I'm Lieutenant Sarah Bennett with Logan Police Department. We need to speak with you about Jennifer Hayes." Crawford's face went pale. "Who?" "Jennifer Hayes. Missing since March 22, 2001. Crawford set his coffee mug on the entryway table. His hand was shaking. I talked to the police about that years ago. I didn't know her. Your DNA was found in a vehicle connected to her disappearance." Crawford's eyes widened. "That's impossible." "David Allen Crawford, you are under arrest for the kidnapping and murder of Jennifer Hayes." Officer Torres stepped forward with handcuffs. Crawford didn't resist. He stood motionless, face drained of color, as Torres read him his Miranda rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Crawford's wife appeared in the hallway behind him, wearing a bathrobe, her face stricken with shock. "David? What's happening?" Crawford didn't answer. He was led to the SUV, placed in the back seat, and driven to Logan Police Department. Bennett sat across from David Crawford in interview room 2, A small, windowless space with a metal table, 2 chairs, and a camera mounted in the corner. Crawford had been offered a lawyer. He'd declined. "I didn't kill anyone," he said, voice shaking. "I don't know how my DNA got in that truck, but I didn't hurt that woman." Bennett slid a photograph across the table. Jennifer Hayes, smiling in her church choir robe. "You remember her?" Crawford stared at the photo. "I saw her at the bank. That's it. I never spoke to her." "You worked for Robert Hayes." "For his nonprofit, yeah. Part-time. I did maintenance. Fixed things around his property. Helped with events at the church." "What was your relationship with Michael Hayes?" "I knew him. We crossed paths a few times when I was working on vehicles for Summit Construction. Mike did some of the mechanical work." "Did you ever ride in his truck?" Crawford hesitated. "Maybe once or twice, if we were moving equipment or something." "Did Robert Hayes ever ask you for help with anything unusual?" Crawford's jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" Bennett leaned forward. "On March 22, 2001, Robert Hayes called you at 8:47 p.m. What did he want?" Crawford's face went gray. "I don't remember." "You don't remember a phone call from 19 years ago?" "No." "Let me help you remember. Jennifer Hayes disappeared that night. Your DNA was found in Michael Hayes' truck, the same truck that was seen leaving the Hayes property at 9:15 p.m. Robert called you 45 minutes before Jennifer vanished. And you worked for Robert. You had access to his property, his vehicles, his family. You knew Michael. You knew the family dynamics. You knew Jennifer was a problem for them." Crawford's hands were shaking. "I want a lawyer." Bennett stood. "Okay, but before your lawyer gets here, I want you to think about something. Jennifer Hayes had 3 children. They grew up without their mother. They asked for her every day. They drew pictures of her, slept with her photos, waited for her to come home. They're adults now, and they still don't know where their mother is buried. You can't undo what happened, but you can give them answers. You can tell them where she is." Crawford stared at the table, silent. Bennett left the room. David Crawford's lawyer arrived 2 hours later. Brian Shepard, a defense attorney from Columbus. Shepard spent 90 minutes with Crawford in a private consultation room. When they emerged, Shepard requested to speak with Bennett and the prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Monica Gray. "My client is willing to provide information in exchange for consideration," Shepard said. Monica Gray's expression was ice-cold. "What kind of consideration?" "Reduced charges. Manslaughter instead of murder. Eligibility for parole after 15 years. "Absolutely not. This was a premeditated kidnapping and murder. My client did not kill Jennifer Hayes." Bennett frowned. "Then who did?" Shepard glanced at Crawford, who nodded. "Robert and Michael Hayes. My client was present, but he did not participate in the actual killing." Bennett felt her heart pounding. "He's willing to testify?" "Yes, in exchange for a plea deal." Monica Gray was silent for a long moment, weighing the options. 20 years. No parole. He serves the full sentence. In exchange, we drop the murder charge and charge him as an accessory. And he tells us everything, including where Jennifer Hayes is buried. Shepard conferred with Crawford. Finally, Crawford nodded. "We have a deal." David Crawford's confession, recorded on March 28, 2020, revealed the horrifying truth about what happened to Jennifer Hayes. Crawford's statement summarized. On March 22, 2001, Robert Hayes called Crawford at 8:47 p.m. and asked him to come to the Hayes property immediately. Crawford arrived at 9:05 p.m. Robert, Sandra, and Michael were in the kitchen, talking in low, urgent voices. Robert explained the plan. Jennifer was finishing her shift at the bank at 10 p.m. Michael would wait in the parking lot. When Jennifer came out, Michael would grab her, force her into his truck, and bring her to the Hayes property. "Why?" Crawford had asked. "She's destroying this family," Robert said. "She's keeping the children from us. She's living in sin. God has shown me what needs to be done." Crawford wanted to leave, but Robert reminded him of a debt. Crawford had borrowed $5,000 from Robert in 1999 to cover medical bills for his daughter. Robert had never asked for repayment. Until now. "You help us tonight, and we're even," Robert said. Crawford, terrified and trapped, agreed. At 9:15 p.m., Michael left in his truck. Crawford followed in his own vehicle. They drove to the bank. Michael parked in the shadows near the employee lot. Crawford parked a block away. At 9:52 p.m., Jennifer exited the back door of the bank. Michael approached her quickly, wearing a ski mask, and grabbed her from behind. Jennifer screamed and dropped her bag. Michael clamped a hand over her mouth and dragged her toward his truck. Crawford watched from a distance, frozen. Michael shoved Jennifer into the passenger seat of his truck, slammed the door, and drove away. Crawford followed. They drove to the Hayes property, where Robert and Sandra were waiting in the barn. Michael pulled Jennifer out of the truck. She was crying, terrified, begging to be let go. "I'll do anything," she said. "Please, I have kids. Please." Robert ignored her. He pulled out plastic zip ties and bound her wrists behind her back, then bound her ankles. Sandra stood watching, arms folded, silent. Michael put duct tape over Jennifer's mouth. Jennifer's breathing became frantic, panicked, desperate gasps through her nose. "She's hyperventilating," Crawford said. "She can't breathe." Robert didn't respond. He was praying aloud, reciting Bible verses about sin and judgment. Jennifer's movements slowed. Her eyes rolled back. "She's dying," Crawford shouted. Robert stopped praying and knelt beside Jennifer. He checked her pulse. "She's gone," he said quietly. Crawford stood there, horrified, unable to move. "What have we done?" he whispered. Robert stood and looked at Michael and Sandra. "God's will has been done." They wrapped Jennifer's body in a tarp and carried her to the septic tank behind the church they attended, Grace Community Church, the same church where Jennifer had sung in the choir. Robert opened the septic access hatch. Michael and Crawford lowered Jennifer's body inside, into the dark, stinking pit below. Robert closed the hatch and replaced the dirt and grass covering it. "No one will ever find her," Robert said, "and no one will ever speak of this again." Crawford went home that night and vomited until there was nothing left inside him. He never told anyone. Not his wife, not the police, not a soul. Until March 28, 2020. On March 30, 2020, a forensic recovery team from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation arrived at Grace Community Church with ground-penetrating radar, excavation equipment, and a cadaver dog. The septic tank was located behind the church building, buried under 2 feet of soil and grass. The hatch, rusted and covered in dirt, hadn't been opened in years. It took 4 hours to excavate. When the hatch was finally opened, the smell was overwhelming. 19 years of decay, waste, and death. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Maria Gonzalez descended into the tank with full hazmat gear, flashlight cutting through the darkness. She found skeletal remains at the bottom, partially submerged in sludge. The recovery took 6 hours. Every bone was carefully extracted, photographed, cataloged. On April 2, 2020, dental records confirmed the identity. Jennifer Marie Hayes. After 19 years, she was finally coming home. On April 3, 2020, arrest warrants were issued for Michael Hayes and Robert Hayes. Michael Hayes was arrested at his home in Logan at 7 a.m. He did not resist. Robert Hayes, now 75 years old and suffering from advanced Parkinson's disease, was arrested at a nursing facility in Nelsonville. He sat in his wheelchair, trembling, silent, as officers read him his rights. Both were charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. David Crawford pled guilty to accessory to murder and received a 20-year sentence with no possibility of parole. The trial of Michael Hayes and Robert Hayes began on September 14, 2020, in Hocking County Courthouse. Prosecutor Monica Gray presented overwhelming evidence. David Crawford's testimony, DNA evidence, phone records, witness statements placing Michael's truck at the scene, and the forensic recovery of Jennifer's remains. The defense argued that Crawford was lying to save himself, that the evidence was circumstantial, that no direct proof linked Michael or Robert to Jennifer's death. The jury didn't buy it. On October 22, 2020, after 8 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts. Michael Hayes, first-degree murder, kidnapping, conspiracy, sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Robert Hayes, first-degree murder, kidnapping, conspiracy, sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Both men sat expressionless as the sentences were read. Neither showed remorse. Patricia Cook sat in the front row of the courtroom throughout the trial, holding a photo of Jennifer. When the guilty verdicts were announced, she closed her eyes and wept. Outside the courthouse, she read a statement to the media. For 19 years, I didn't know where my daughter was. I didn't know if she was alive or suffering or alone. Every night I prayed for answers. Today we finally have them. Jennifer can rest now, and we can begin to heal. Patricia organized a memorial service for Jennifer on November 7, 2020, at Grace Community Church, the same church where Jennifer had sung in the choir, the same church where her body had been hidden for nearly 2 decades. Over 200 people attended. Pastor Richardson, now retired, delivered the eulogy. Jennifer was a light, he said. She loved her children. She loved her community. She loved life. What was done to her was an act of evil, but evil does not have the final word. Love does. Memory does. Justice does. Jennifer's children, Emma, now 25, Daniel, 23, and Grace, 20, stood together at the front of the church and lit candles in their mother's memory. Grace, who had no conscious memories of Jennifer, spoke briefly. I don't remember my mom's voice or her laugh or the way she hugged me, but I carry her with me every day. I see her in old photos. I hear stories about her kindness, her strength, her love, and now I know she never abandoned us. She was taken from us, but she never stopped being our mom. Jennifer's ashes were scattered in the Hocking Hills, near Ash Cave, where she used to hike with her children, where sunlight filters through trees and birds sing, and the world is green and alive. Lieutenant Sarah Bennett stood in the cold case storage facility one final time, holding box hashtag 2001-047. The box was empty now, all evidence processed, all samples analyzed, all questions answered. She thought about Detective Laura Martinez, who'd worked this case for 2 years, who'd retired without closure, who'd carried the weight of Jennifer's disappearance into her golden years. Bennett called Martinez's number, the one Patricia had given her. Martinez answered on the second ring. Hello, Detective Martinez? This is Lieutenant Sarah Bennett from Logan PD. I wanted you to know, we solved Jennifer Hayes' case. There was a long silence. Then Martinez's voice, thick with emotion. You found her. We found her. And we arrested the people responsible. Michael Hayes and his father. Life sentences. No parole. Martinez exhaled, a sound like a weight lifting. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for not giving up. I didn't solve it, Bennett said. You did. You collected the DNA. You documented everything. You built the foundation. I just had better technology. Does Patricia know? Yes, she's at peace. Finally. Martinez was quiet for a moment. Jennifer deserved better than what happened to her. But I'm glad she's home. I'm glad her children know the truth. So am I. On a cold morning in March 2021, 20 years to the day after Jennifer Hayes vanished, Patricia Cook stood in the employee parking lot behind First National Bank. The bank had been renovated, the old streetlight replaced with modern LED fixtures, the cracked pavement repaved smooth and black. But Patricia could still see the spot where Jennifer's bag had been found, where her daughter had taken her last free breath, where her life had been stolen. Patricia placed white daisies on the ground, the same flowers she'd brought every year for 19 years. But this time, she wasn't placing them for a ghost. She was placing them for a daughter she'd buried, a daughter who'd been found, a daughter who finally had justice. You're home now, baby, Patricia whispered. You're home. The wind stirred the daisies, carrying their scent across the parking lot, sweet and clean and alive. And in the blue Ohio sky, The sun broke through the clouds, casting warm light over the town of Logan, population 7,152, where a terrible crime had been committed and, 2 decades later, finally answered. Jennifer Hayes was gone, but she was not forgotten, and her story, her life, her love, her light, would endure.